Creative productivity. Thank you for joining me today in this conversation. You'll be joining my friend Peter Wilson and I in looking at what creative productivity really is and what it can do in contribution to your life, both personally and professionally. Peter is a coach based in London with decades of experience in management and supporting teams. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I get the real good fortune of both getting to have a conversation with a dear friend and colleague, Peter Wilson. So thank you, Peter, for taking the time and making the time to have this conversation. I love it.
I'm delighted.
Yeah, we're never short on things to have great conversations about. So I'm glad that we can do this and make it look like we're doing it professionally. You know, we would do this anyway, but we record it and make it look like it's a bigger deal. So thank you.
No, I'm really pleased to be here, and it's so nice to be doing this. You and I have been talking on and off for 5-6 years, so it's nice to have something recorded and see where it goes. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. We always thought they were profound, but now it'll be recorded, you know. So Peter is, I'm going to read Peter's bio because I just like what people write about themselves. So Peter is an executive coach and author based in London, but before that was an international trade development facilitator in a demanding role who learned the hard way that chasing after mental well-being is like fighting gravity. It's hard work and unnecessary. After spending hundreds of hours and thousands of pounds/dollars learning coping strategies, success secrets, and power tips, he ended up giving himself more and more to do to combat stress. No more. Peace of mind is in none of this. So thank you, Peter. I appreciate you joining.
No, thank you. And I'm looking forward to our discussion together. I thought I would start by asking people to write down an area of their life that just on a piece of paper. This is not for sharing, it's just for you. Okay, so we're not going to ask you to refer back to it at all, but grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down an area of life where you feel really stuck. You're not seeing any movement in that area and you would like to see movement. So it could be work, it could be life, it could be project, it could be anything along those lines at all.
Professional, personal, no off topic, anything.
Nothing off topic. Just write it down. And the idea is you write it down and then just put it to one side and forget about it. And I need to know, because you're off screen, I need to know when you've done that.
Yeah, you can raise your hand and just
I can't see you.
So Peter, you and I'll just check in for a second, and while they can kind of reflect and consider what they would write down. Yeah. So when we had this talk, you and I kind of got the inspiration to talk about creative productivity, something I thought was so interesting that I hear from my clients a lot is they feel like moving with inspiration means sit around and do nothing until, you know, you basically, like I said, defy gravity and start moving. And so that kind of was the impetus for us to have a conversation on creative productivity, which includes inspiration and engagement.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I used to think that way too. I thought you kind of like you had to sit somewhere and wait for an idea, and only went through non-action. It led to some great breakthrough, and then you acted on it, and it didn't sit well with me. But I thought I'd start with a story that might illustrate that. Years ago, I was asked to do a 6-week project in Geneva, and I had to build. It was for the United Nations. I had to build a database for the United Nations so that that database would help them work with hundreds of people, and they would have a common way of understanding all the data that they were using to work with those people. The first 5 weeks of that job went beautifully. And then I hit a major snag on week 6, a major problem on week 6. I had everything working in the background. Everything worked beautifully, but the display that showed all the results was showing nothing. so it was kind of like if you go to a theater production, the production was going really well, but the curtains were closed, so nobody could see it. Nothing was working to show the results that were going on behind the screen. And so what I did was what I always did back then was I doubled down on effort, on time, on reorganizing my project so that in that final week I would get everything done. Because everybody knows that if the small hammer doesn't work, you get a bigger one, right? You just power through. So
that's think about it more, not just do more, but think about it more.
Think about it more, work at it more. So my days for that last week got longer and longer and longer because more time, more effort, I would break through. Okay. And this, Wednesday night, I had to get walked out of the United Nations because it's like a ghost town at 10 o'clock at night. I had to get walked out by security. Next night, the same thing. Friday was my last day. And by lunchtime, still I had nothing at all on how to solve this problem that would make everything work. And in exasperation, I just went for a walk in the grounds and looked out into Mont Blanc in the distance. I thought I'm going to have to rebook. I'm going to have to do some more weeks. I'm going to have to come back, go home for the weekend, come back, and just it all be on my time. And then all of a sudden, I had an idea of what to do. And I ran back up to my desk, and within a few keystrokes, I had the whole problem solved. But I want to now tell that story from a different perspective. Because a few years later, by applying the same technique, the same powering through, working at it, it's all on me. It's overthinking through the problem. After a couple of years of doing that, more of that, I had burnout. I burnt out, and I had to take a lot of time off work and regroup. And I started to rethink how I did things. And I saw that story from a completely different light. So I'd like to tell it again. For the first 5 weeks, everything was going well. Then on week 6, I hit a snag. I completely ignored my inner signal, my inner voice, to slow down, take some time apart, and to think about it afresh, to take a step back. But I powered through, and I kept going, and I kept working, and I had to get walked out by security because I was walking so late, until finally I didn't know what to do but to pay attention to that voice and take a break. And it was only when I took a half step back, stopped thinking about it, and started to think about other things, stopped overthinking, that a new thought, a new insight, a new breakthrough came through, and I knew then what to do. So where I think about creative productivity now is that I used to think that I was really productive through organization, time, effort, and willpower. That was my definition of being productive. That was my definition of success. That was my
And Peter, to interject about really a part of a recipe to success was how much is this on your mind? I mean, of you really giving it your all, in air quotes, all in bandwidth and all of that to put in that equation.
Yeah.
Not to overlook that you could sit in a chair and be exhausted from having it on your mind.
It was all on my mind all of the time, and it was all on my shoulders to work it through. I had no relationship with creativity because I saw it all through the eyes of me thinking everything through to the nth degree until I could work it out
And figuring it out.
and figuring it out. Yeah.
That's a kind of a very common phrase we use over here about
Yeah.
people realize they don't even realize they're saying it, and they're going, "Oh, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out."
Yeah. And the brain is churning away on digging through ideas and lists and resorting and reorganizing. But what I realized was that how I act when I'm stuck is not how I act when I'm not. And it was a major breakthrough for me. And I realized that when I'm not stuck, I'm in a feeling state. I'm in a good feeling state. I'm open-minded. I'm experimental. I step back. I play with ideas. But when I get stuck, that goes out the window, and I try to power through and think it and figure stuff out.
Oh my gosh, that's so spot on, because I kind of refer to that in when we lose our right mind. Because in our right mind is when we are relaxed and curious and taking it easy. It's like our vacation mind. I
Yeah.
kind of call that our right mind. But somehow, at least in our culture, that mind suggests we're not serious about what we're in front to do. And we're way too casual and too laissez-faire, and we won't get anything done.
Yeah. And then we kind of like get very hard on ourselves and become more driven, and that leads to stress, mental stress, mental tension. But the other thing I realized, that it could look like all you have to do is go for a walk and you get an idea. And I don't mean that by my story. I don't mean that the answer is when you're stuck, you go for a walk. What I mean is that the answer when my feeling state changes to moves to one of my feeling state drops, and I become tense and I become overthinking about a problem. That's the time to let go of what you're doing and see what else comes forward as something to do instead. To have to get perspective from it. To get to have a reset, because there's no. I liken it to what is better? Is it better to try to reorganize what you're doing from a low state of mind, or try to get back into a state of mind that's helpful so you can see it more clearly?
To get back to your right mind, so to speak, just to use that phrase.
Yeah, to get back to your right
Mhm.
mind.
And I think, Peter, what you're pointing to is, at least for our culture, is really starting to notice that the model that we did power through university in and upper level accomplishments and all of that good stuff. I'm not discounting it, but I mean all of that powering through that we did to get where we are today. While it's a model, it doesn't have to be the model that we judge ourselves against, especially when we're not experiencing what we are really wanting to explore in our life, or if that model is creating suffering and burnout and fatigue and a very stale experience of life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you see, I think it relates to how I see what you said, is that it relates to me to how we use our time. And there's two things that I see regarding time that come out from what you've just said. One is that I used to see like taking a break as necessary so that I could be productive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it as part of the equation of being productive.
Yes.
And I do now. And the reason why is that, and it's part of the reason why I asked you to write down something at the beginning of the call, because our mind works on our behalf for us while we're engaged, while we're having downtime, while we're doing something else. And what I learned is that time, the time that we spend looking after ourselves or doing something, or disengaged from the activity, but our mind's working on it anyway, means that that downtime or that away time is part of productivity. It's part of us allowing our mind to settle such that it's working for us and a new insight, a new breakthrough can come forward. The other thing that I see from what you said about how we use our time is that if I go back to the Geneva story, I learned that all time is not equal. What the time after I had the insight was supercharged. I was able to do what I did within a matter of minutes.
Mm.
The time before that was me fighting. It was hard labor that I didn't, when I look back, I didn't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But those hours were hard. They were long. They were me pushing through. But the when I had the breakthrough, I knew one thing led to another, and it happened very quickly after that.
Well, and I think what you're speaking to too is hard work about even bandwidth between our ears. While we do all the physical organizing and the brainstorming and the post-it noting and the
Yeah,
all of that good stuff, but
yeah,
it's the bandwidth within our head that can get so occupied with what has got to happen, in this make or break world that we live in.
right, right.
And and could you speak about what we talked about too, about where creative productivity can happen in that model that we talked about with the circles, and what the kind of the invisible ingredient we don't realize is, you spoke to about how your mind works on our behalf, but
Right. Okay.
how.
So the way that you and I were talking about this session was to see how creativity and productivity overlap. So there's we're interested in what happens in where there's crossover. So what we're not saying is that organization and time and effort are not important. They are, but it's the relationship that we have with them that's important. And the way that I see the mind today is that we can use thought for ourselves or thought against ourselves. And when I find myself overthinking something, dwelling on it, puzzling at it, kind of trying to wrangle with my thinking, I'm using thought against myself. I'm creating a problem in my mind and then trying to fight my way through it.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas if I'm using thought for myself, I know that I create my world from inside to out. I know that I'm imagining my next action or the words that I'm about to say. But I also know that I can keep coming back to the well. I can keep if I say something now and it doesn't come out right, then I can pause for a second and go back to the well and say it differently. Well, the same is how we meet projects and activities. But sometimes we imagine them in our head as something we got to wade through, and then we start wading through them. But if I go back to a neutral mind, or how did you put it earlier, Sherry, to a right mind? If
Well,
I,
to really, I think even setting it up that this is a problem that has to be solved,
yeah,
or this is a challenge I have to figure out, or this is an obstacle to me getting what I want. This is a challenge and or an obstacle or a block to me
yeah,
feeling good in life. I have to get this figured out before I can feel good.
right,
It's that kind of
right.
the way
Or,
we set it
or,
up.
or I have to meet with this difficult person. How am I going to meet with them? What am I going to be like when I meet? How am I going to strategize my way through this meeting with this difficult person? All of that I have put in my head before I even engage with the person.
100%. a
Right.
100%.
Right. Rather than meeting the person fresh and in the moment with an open mind and being myself in that moment with them. There's a great phrase, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, we don't meet the person, we meet our thinking about the person.
Right. Right. We're really we've contaminated, or you had just spoken about, like there's two circles, creativity and productivity, and where they overlap, that I the golden mean, as they say, that of the overlap between creativity and productivity, where magic and mystery and unknown exist.
Yeah.
Typically, when we face a challenge or a situation, we don't allow the unknown to exist.
Right.
We arm ourselves with strategy, um, agendas, assumptions on how it's gonna what's gonna be required of me to move forward. And what you and I are both saying is, like, all of that creates impediments to moving forward.
And it gets in the way of us being creative and productive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think when I talk about kind of coming back to a neutral mind, what that means is letting go of the thinking that's getting in the way of us just being in the moment, or just being um, neutral and seeing what happens in the moment, or engaging in a way that is experimental and playful and open. All the things that we know to do when we're creating at our best.
Exactly. Exactly. Because in our culture, it's like the person with the best strategy will win, like as if it's a game of war
Yeah,
versus collaboration.
yeah,
And so we're the challenge of we're up against something versus exploring how how we can see things differently or do things differently is a very different place, because sadly, at least in the corporate environments, so oftentimes somebody has to be the winner, which means somebody's got to be the loser, and it's like that's so counter to what creative productivity is. That's a model that doesn't set up for
yeah.
innovation.
I think that if you think about even in a work setting, if I think about the best meetings I've been involved in or best projects, I've been in a healthy frame of mind in those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've been open to contributing. I've had no judgment about where the outcome's going to be. I'm not listening to the judgment I might have of the other people. I've let all of that go. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just being in the moment and creating in the moment with the other people with a view to seeing where it's going to go.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think if I think of the meetings where I haven't performed so well in, it's because I'm going to the same old meeting with the same old people and nothing's going to happen here and it never happens anyway. And what's the point of this? And I'm going in with my story. I'm going in with my noise. I'm going in with my low feeling and a judgment.
Yes. Yes.
And if 12 of us are doing that, then guess what? Guess what's going to happen?
Yes.
You know, it's going to be a bun fight. You know, it's going to be hard work. But it's always been curious. I mean, I've spent most of my life in meetings, and I love the human dynamics that go on. You know, until I knew what we're talking about here, Sherry, it always fascinated me how there were some occasions when be 12 people in a meeting and they're all trying to work out a solution and they're talking over everybody and throwing out ideas and people criticizing the idea or each other or it'll never work again. And then somebody at the back of the room who hasn't spoken for an hour says quite softly, well, why don't we do this? And it just breaks through all of the noise. And now
It's like parting of the Red Sea.
yeah, that's right. And it's like, you know, it's one of those Homer Simpson moments. I'm sure I can't be the only person who's witnessed that, and I see some people
No.
nodding their heads in agreement. Now, what's that about? That for me is that person hasn't got caught up in all of the noise, in all of the drama, and all of the overthinking. They've had some perspective and they've come up with an idea that out of the blue, from insight, from that place of magic and mystery that you talked about, and it's led to a breakthrough that's led a way out. And I've seen whole meetings go absolutely silent when that happens, and a real acknowledgement of, oh yeah, we could do that.
Exactly. And you know what's I occurred to me, Peter, when you said that, it's like that one person came to the meeting, the conversation, I'll say conversation between partners, conversation between parent and child, that when interacting with human beings, for something to move, we typically are going to engage with human beings. And if one human being drops their story of this reality, if they just check the story of this reality
Yeah,
on the side, they would have full availability in their mind to receive inspiration, ideas, intuition, the
right,
magic, and the mystery.
right. Right. And so just back to your earlier point, that's not about sitting alone somewhere on a mountain and waiting for an idea. That's in a busy meeting, busy work environment, and it leads to immediate action. So
Immediate.
that's where creativity and productivity come together in my mind. It's an active thing. It's you know, the other way of putting it is ideation and action coming together. They're partners, and I had forgotten that they are partners. I'd seen them as entirely separate. I knew how to be productive in a organized sense, and I knew how to organize myself. I knew how to bring time and effort together and lead a project through, but I'd forgotten about the relationship to creativity, and I didn't know at the time that we create our own reality, and we tell ourselves stories that we then believe and then try to fight our way through. And I think the fact that we can go back to the well, as I put it, or come from a neutral mind and think freshly again, is so powerful. I've got one other
It's a
story.
secret ingredient.
Yeah. Say again?
I think it's really like a secret ingredient or a superpower that we don't know we possess, that is always available, and
Yeah.
it doesn't require anything of
Yeah.
me other than a pivot, a shift, a remembering that it exists.
Yeah, and it's like there's a realization, oh, I'm caught up again, or I'm overthinking again. Okay, I'm gonna let that go. Or I'm starting to feel tense, and as if this is all on me, and as if I've got to wade my way through. Oh, I'm gonna let that go.
Mhm.
And in that moment of letting go, or coming back to a more settled mind, that's when we quite often know what to do next, even if that next thing is doing something different for a while.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, I'm thinking about two situations, Peter, that one professional and one on a personal side, where I've worked with a couple where the I'll say the assumed identity, one partner assumes the identity of the other one when they go, oh no, oh no, no, he's impossible. It'll never work. He's never
Yes,
this, he's
yes,
never that, he's never that. And not realizing that in her innocence, she is creating an identity for her partner that has put barriers to that open space of possibility because the story is so convincing.
yeah,
And then another situation where I was working with a team leader, and she said, well, I really need to know how I'm going to go into this meeting because I was told before I took this job that this person is X, Y, and Z. And I'm going, now, why would you want to take street gossip on a person into a meeting of someone you haven't met that you're going to have to be in a relationship with? The
yeah,
person doesn't stand a chance. So, and both of that, like creative productivity between human beings, if those, if people are believing their reality so strongly, they're
yeah.
not going to see anything else.
That's right. I mean, I mean, you and I both coach. So how many times has the has a manager brought you in to coach one of their team members, and they give you a picture of the team member that you haven't yet met, and they lay out, oh, this person's difficult in this way, that way, that way, and you're listening, but trying not to let
Now,
any of
now,
it sit, because then if you do, you're not meeting the client, you're not meeting the team member fresh for themselves and connecting with them in a way that can draw more of their well-being out.
more of that tapping that magic and mystery
That's
golden,
right.
that overlap. But Peter, I want to just insert in that. It's like if I'm even in a conversation with myself and something I feel like I'm up against, that whatever I feel like I'm up against, it's as real as a person sitting across the table. So it doesn't matter if it's a primary love relationship, if it's the topic of dating, if it's a parent to a child, if it's a child to a parent,
Yeah,
if it's a team member to an individual. It's like it's
yeah,
all the same. Where we believed in a fixed, hard, solid something, and there's no space for
Yeah.
unless we really start to see we drank the Kool-Aid of our own story,
Yeah.
that we can open our mind to intuition, inspiration, wisdom, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I mean, it is interesting. It kind of, we do make up stories and then believe them and then get ourselves kind of like, then that story becomes a habit, and then we don't see it fresh anymore. I mean, my son, as you know, has autism, Sherry, and we've had it's the we had 6 years of school, getting to school being very difficult with him. And he was, you know, he was going through teenage years at the time, and we were understanding his autism and stuff. So he was spending a lot of time in his room, and he saw that as his safe place, so to speak. And I wanted to spend time with him, just to be with him and to hang out with him. But quite often he would say no. So I'd go in and say, Matty, would shall we hang out for half an hour, or shall we go out for a walk, or should we? And I went in every day. And then after a few weeks, he just kept saying no, no, I don't want to go. I don't feel like going out. And I found myself one day thinking, I'm not going to ask him because he's just going to say no. And I started for a moment to believe the story that I was telling myself. I mean, I had all the data to support the fact that he's going to say. I had 3, 4, 5 weeks of data of he's just going to say no. But I thought, no, I'm not going to believe I'm not going to start believing my own story about that. I went in and I asked him again, and he did say no. But I went in the next day and he said yes. And then I went in the next day and he started to say yes, and he started to say yes a little bit more often, and then sometimes no. But if I had started to believe my story that I was building about him, even with some data that could support it, there was no opportunity for me to connect if I'd started to believe that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There was no space for the unknown to show itself, or the that what you haven't experienced. I think, put it this way, there was no space for what you haven't experienced to enter the equation.
Right. And
I
I think
love that.
how this relates to creativity and productivity is that I think that we do this with areas in life where we're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can build up a body of data and point to it and say, well, it didn't work last time, and it didn't work the time before that. And then we start to persuade ourselves of that story and don't give ourselves the freedom to step back, the freedom to reimagine, the freedom to come up with a new idea, the freedom for it not to all be on us to come up with the idea, but to let it just come out of the blue because we're not overthinking it.
Yes.
And when we connect with that freedom again, with that creativity again, then quite often there is a new idea that we haven't imagined before that changes the whole scene.
And then when our mind loosens up and frees up for this, the gift that we all have of having a fresh thought shows up, it's almost gobsmacked. And how did I not see that before today? It's so simple.
See that before? How did I not see that before? It was right in front of my eyes. Why did I?
It's like those lost car keys. Those car keys never walked around the house, but they're exactly where they were when you couldn't find them, and you looked in that same spot 15 times.
I think our our thought is so magical and beautiful and powerful, and at the same time we forget that it creates a compelling story that that we can get hooked by. I mean, and feeling is our guide in this. How we feel is our guide for this. I remember a few years ago remember when we were all in lockdown? We were all working from home, and the whole world was shut down. And I was supporting a company through providing online training programs. And I was running this program on a subject called trusted advisor, how they could be trusted advisors. And so when they come back into the office, I had some more to work on when they were working with people. And I thought, okay, I designed this program online because everybody's at home. And I would make it about videos and then audios, and then I'd send them out homework, and then they would come back and they would give me the answers to the homework, and then I'd build out the next module. And then what I'd do from there is I'd create this and that for them. And before I knew it, half an hour into me doing this, I thought, I'm feeling tight and tense by all that I had come up with, and in my tightness and tenseness, I thought, well, I'm not creating that program. Because I just felt heavier and heavier and heavier, and and so I thought, well, what shall I do?
I'm laughing, Peter. I'm thinking when you won't sign up for your own program, that's a good indicator.
Yeah, I'm not doing that, because I made it harder and harder and harder for myself. I made it this big thing before I even picked up a pen to create the first thing. I thought, well, I'm not doing that. But I still wanted to do the program. So what I did was I recorded a 7-minute video, sent it out, and asked for comments. And the comments came back, and then I said, okay, right, let's discuss it when we meet for an hour next week. And we ended up co-creating the program as we went along. From a very much more interactive, creative space that led to 8 weeks worth of material that, if I looked back, had a website, ended up with a website, multiple videos, multiple audios, lots of recordings of interaction. So I had all the outcomes, but it was a beauty to develop, because I was in a, it was in a very playful, done in a very playful way.
And I think what you're pointing to, Peter, is that it was alive. You know what I mean? By asking the question, it was alive. It wasn't manufactured from historic data that you would be operating off of. That
That's
the
nice.
invitation was for it to be alive and real and relevant in this moment. And that's
I like how you put
fun.
that. That's nice. That's nice. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Well, could we take a couple of questions in case somebody's got something on their mind around creative productivity?
Cool.
That would be real cool. If anybody has anything, just please speak up.
I don't have a specific question right now, but this has been a very interesting conversation, and as Sherry knows, very relevant to where I am. And I guess I could create a question out of that. I'm in a place in my life where I'm wanting to sort of contemplate legacy, in the sense of, maybe I have a couple more good decades, and what do I want to do with my time? What do I want to do that really would be something that could be quite different, that might encompass what I've learned, in a life, and hopefully do something, good and lasting, that might survive me. And and it's like, I'm aware that some of that could be coming from an ego place, but also, if you look at the planet, we're in a place where it's important for us to care about that
Yeah.
level of contribution, and it becomes overwhelming. And so how does one uh I guess hold a space of humility in the face of something that's very frightening?
So in the part that you say it's frightening, I'm wondering about checking out the reality that suggests it's frightening.
The frightening part is, and this came up during your talk. You looked at it a particular way, but the driving force that usually stops us is our fear. And the fear right now that I'm speaking to is what appears to me right here, right now, that it kind of already is too late. It's not too late to make a difference in terms of, people being a little more at ease with a really, really lousy climate future or environmental future.
Right.
But I feel an urgency that ramps up that need to produce, and to not just go out on a walk and trust that, things will all fall into place. And there's a balance between those two. You don't just go on a walk and trust, but to some extent, that's kind of all you can do.
I think I hear, I is it Vivia? Is
Yes.
that what I hear two things in what you're saying, Vivia. One is what you want to do, and the other is what you think you're up against. And when I heard the switch in what you're talking, the excitement when you were talking about what you wanted to do switched into something else when you thought about what you were up against. And my invitation to you is to point yourself at what you want to do. That would be my invitation. Because I think if we start ideating about what we are up against, there's no end to that. But when we start ideating about, or we start creating about what we want to bring, there's no end to that either. So I would invite yourself to direct towards that.
And next steps will come. I have to say that by opening to looking at what you want to do, next steps will come. But if we feel like it's pointless, or that whole idea of what's if I need to answer the question, what's the point?
Yeah, that's heavy.
That's heavy. It's like we don't know. What's the point? We're asking inspiration, or asking, or kind of looking at inspiration and expecting an answer from what we already know.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what you were hearing was really not as much where I'm stuck, because I mean, I jumped straight to I need to be doing something that's worthwhile, or so there is a kind of anxiety connected to it, but for whatever reason, personal history, whatever, that what I want to do is not real clear.
The worthwhile will be pulling the brakes on what you want to create. The worthwhileness of it is creating a break. And I would your creation is to bring something from nothing into something, is to bring something out of nothing into something, and to keep doing that. And you don't know how it will be received, but the onus, the pleasure, the joy, the beauty, the creativity all of that's available through the bringing forward of something out of nothing.
Incrementally.
Yeah. And
So, you're not going to know what each step is serving. I think that's the part.
It could be that the 33rd thing is of value to somebody, or that the 12th thing,
right,
but you won't. This, Vivia, this was me to a T. I needed to know step 7 before I took step 1.
Yeah.
And it created a lot of internal stress for me. And I had to let go and be more playful with it, and I had to get more comfortable with not knowing and more comfortable with playful risk.
Yeah.
And enjoying the act of creativity and productivity for the sake of it, and then let the outcome be the outcome. Because in that process, I got to learn. I got to see what worked, what didn't work. Because that's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can't know. There's not a right recipe or a wrong recipe to what you want to contribute. There's just not a right or wrong ingredient. So maybe in this moment it's a walk, and maybe it's tomorrow, I haven't talked to so-and-so. Let me pick up the phone and call. You just don't let the mind equate an action to relevance to what you want to do, and just follow what those incremental inspirations might be. Have your ear to that. And because the part that seems to be reporting on how you're doing at getting where you want to go is the least helpful person on your team. I mean,
Right.
It's not even a voice to be listened to, really. It's not even a person. It's just a voice it's not relevant to what you're doing. It's an element of a completely different model. And you're turning away from that old model and doing something, using a different model altogether.
No, I'm trying to write something at the moment. I was trying to write something today, and I was writing something about my burnout. I was writing down 10 things from my burnout that helped me to see life differently. And all the time my critic is going, oh, this is no good, this is no good. And you're talking about creative productivity tonight as well. So this is no good. This is not very creative. And then an hour later, oh, this is quite good. That's not bad.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's noise. It's noise, and the opportunity here is to engage and see what happens, but to engage in a way where we know it's not all on us. We get insight, we get ideas, we get inspiration, and the fact that happens is what we're pointing to.
Right.
And it happens for every human being. No one is void of this component.
Yeah.
No one.
Good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, we're right at the end of our conversation, and I don't know how fast the hour went, but it went fast. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please send them to me, and I'll share them with Peter, and we'll get back to you, because it would just be a fun topic that really is. It's a lifetime of exploration that I think's on offer. So I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So thank you for coming to the call. Peter, thank you. Always fun.
Oh, it's really nice to meet you all. Thank you.
And how can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to my website, petewilson.co.uk, and you can get in touch with me there or through LinkedIn. Or you've got my email address, I think, on your site somewhere. So
Absolutely. So gosh, thank you, everyone. I really feel so fortunate to be able to have these conversations, and to have these conversations in a circle of friends is a double gift. So Thanks for showing up. I mean, my real pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. In this exploration of creative productivity, I hope you take away some fresh ideas and really a cleaner, clearer, quieter mind when you're faced with situations that really are calling for new solutions. If you'd like support in that area, please reach out. I'd love to have a chat with you to see if what I offer could be a support to you.